Friends, how's it going? Welcome to this new episode of Changing Tracks. How's it going? Today we have one of those connections that I like. We hope that the satellite connection goes well all the way from the States. Today we have with us Michael Gardner. Michael, how are you?
Well, thank you very much.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, Michael. Are you married? Do you have children?
Married, 57 years old, 3 children. One's a servant sister. Lorianne is married with our first granddaughter. Sarah Elizabeth just completed her master's degree and will be teaching full-time at a Catholic school in Ohio this fall. I'm still employed, although I should be retired.
Can you share a little about your childhood, your infancy, your family in general?
I grew up in a pagan household. We're all pagans, by the way. We learned that on our trip to the Holy Land. But born in Indiana, lived in Cleveland a little bit, basically grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, though, and lived in a neighborhood that was kind of, to me, it was like Northern Ireland, the Catholics against the Protestants. So there was a whole group that went to Catholic schools, and the rest of us went to the public schools.
Were you anti-Catholic?
No, but some of the neighbors, and I think to an extent my parents were a little bit anti-Catholic. At least I had that feeling growing up. My parents weren't particularly religious, but for some reason I felt called to the Methodist Church. Of course, all the Protestant churches are the same, as I'll explain in a few minutes, but there was a group of us, I guess the group that I used the phrase you run with in high school. And there was twin girls, the Dunham girls, and their father was the pastor of the Methodist Church. So they kind of built a very active youth group. He was very dynamic, So early on, I insisted my parents drive me over there, and then once I could drive myself. I never recall them going to church. I'm sure they did. And my dad now is 83, and he's in a Bible study a couple days a week, and seems to have come back. But as a kid, I don't remember him doing that. So I had to get myself to church. So we go to the service, and then we go to youth group. And there was youth group 1 or 2 nights a week, so it was a pretty important part of my life.
So, have you always believed in God, even though as a child you did not practice the faith? Or was it simply to go along with your friends?
I don't remember my early years. I just know in high school is when we really kind of came together and the Bible meant more. And again, it's a Methodist church, but pay attention when they do the readings and the homilies, or they didn't call them homilies, but they call them sermons. And maybe because I knew the pastor, but still, the sermons I always, paid attention and tried to learn. And so prior to that, I'm not sure. I don't really recall, but at least in high school is when I started to live some kind of faith.
Okay, so did you see your faith as something that was really your own?
I took it as my own, yeah. We did outreach work. There was also a radio station where we had to go on and talk about our faith. It was a Sunday program, and we all had to, there's a few of us that volunteered to go do it, and we had to go on the radio and talk about our faith. So I'd say I took that on my own. It wasn't just my friends.
Okay. And this faith that you had as a Methodist, did it help you to make decisions in your life? What I mean to say is, did it have an impact on you? Did it influence your way of seeing life, the way that you acted?
It didn't really take, I was the oldest in a fairly large family, so I knew I had to put myself through school. So I was constantly working, and I was probably more focused on making money to pay for my education than the faith, because I know in college, there were summers, I worked 110 hours a week. And I worked weekends and holidays, and I was a restaurant chef. So you just work whenever you're supposed to work, and didn't really think about Easter, Christmas, quite honestly. I was focused on earning money to pay for college. It was just that simple. I don't recall going to church after high school. I just made money and went to school.
Yeah. And how did you find out about the Catholic Church? How did that come about?
Well, it's interesting. Freshman year, there was a guy named Al Maluski who was on my wing or floor, whatever they call it. And Al very devout Catholic. He prayed the rosary every day. I know he went to Mass on the weekends, if not occasionally during the week. He was a very, very disciplined guy. He ended up going to dental school at Ohio State, and he's now has his own dental practice. But I just remember admiring his loyalty and his faith and his discipline. And, you know, he wouldn't go out certain nights because he had to study. I mean, he was just, I mean, he's a fun guy. And we played basketball together, we did things, but he had his routine. He prayed in the morning, prayed in the evening, went to Mass, and it was just like, wow.
So he was kind of an example for you.
Yeah, and I reflect on it later at the time. I mean, I admired him. I didn't ridicule him or, you know, some people didn't, what's this guy doing? But I mean, it was curious. We talk and, you know, I didn't delve too deeply into the faith, I recall, because I really didn't have time. I was going to school full-time and working full-time. Because even in college, I was working 40 to 50 hours a week on the weekends, like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, just to earn enough money to stay in school. So I was very focused and disciplined on what I had to do, but I remember the conversations we had. It was, you know, he was quite a role model.
Michael, how did you meet your wife?
I was, again, in the restaurant business. I was
okay. In what church or what denomination did you get married in?
We were married in a Presbyterian church. I'm not sure why, because I don't recall her parents being particularly strong from a religious perspective. Maybe that was the closest church to their house. At this point, I don't recall why, but it was the Presbyterian Church. 29 years ago, by the way. It's a long time.
You mentioned earlier that you have 3 children. In what religion or what faith did you educate them in? As Methodists, Presbyterians?
We got married in the Presbyterian Church, and some reason gravitated to the Presbyterian Church. There was one in our community in Westerville where the girls were born. They were all baptized in the Presbyterian Church. Very dynamic pastor there as well. And I thought I keep calling them homilies, the sermons were very powerful. But the thing that I have always had kind of a love for too is kind of reaching out to the poor, doing work with the homeless. They had a great outreach program there. So I just became more active and ingrained kind of in that Presbyterian church.
Did you feel, for example, that you were missing something in the Presbyterian Church? That you needed something more, that your faith was asking something more of you?
At the time, no. Yeah, we went to church on Sunday. Generally went as a family. There were times where, as the girls got older, I would just take the girls. Sometimes Cynthia went, sometimes she didn't. I don't recall the reasons why, but we tended to go to the Presbyterian Church. Again, I have always had a passion for helping others, so I was active in that. You know, Sundays seemed to be enough because I'm working and 3 daughters and got my hands full. So I didn't at the time really perceive anything was missing.
So then how did you come about the Catholic faith? How did this faith start to grow in you?
Well, my wife converted, so that was really kind of the beginning. I think she was doing 54-day novenas and had the girls praying and a whole series of things.
And what did you think when she told you that she was going to convert?
Great, but I'm not.
Okay.
I was happy in the Presbyterian Church. You know, you can go to the Catholic Church, I'll go to Presbyterian. You know, it didn't faze me, quite honestly.
Okay. What happened? What happened then? What made you convert?
I think it was all these 54-day novenas. I mean, ultimately, you know, I know the family was praying for my conversion. I thought I was doing fine in the Presbyterian Church. And then at some point, decided I'd just go through RCIA just to learn. You know, she'd already become a Catholic. She kind of snuck in the back door like right before Easter and really hadn't gone through the entire program because it's a September through Easter. I think she was February through Easter, whatever it was. So I thought, well, might as well learn about the Catholic faith, isn't going to hurt me. She needed to get really the complete RCI program, even though she'd already converted, so that really started the journey.
Was there anything in the Catholic faith that was difficult for you to accept?
Well, typically I think people struggle with the Eucharist. That was pretty easy. I mean, it's in the Bible, and if you don't get it emotionally or spiritually, you get it intellectually. I mean, it's very, very clear. And I said, well, okay, that I understand and accept and believe, right? I was given that grace. The part I struggled with was confession. I just didn't really understand that and the need for it. Who knows why that was? I guess it's the instruction you get as you go through that process, and some things are emphasized, some aren't, and that's one that clearly the Father Danner had a strong love of the Eucharist, so maybe that's why that was easier to understand and accept and get that grace. And as in most Catholic churches in the U.S., you get 30 minutes a week for confession, so they don't tend to, they don't place a lot of importance on it. It didn't seem to be emphasized during RCI, so it's just that piece of the puzzle never really understood.
And now you understand it.
Well, we went to Lourdes at some point along the journey and did the bath, which was quite exciting. The little Frenchmen are still laughing at me because I scream when I hit the water. And they thought that was quite hilarious. And then we had lunch somewhere and we came back and there was some delay. We were going to confession and there was some delay, so it started late, but at whatever point, got into confession, and I know I was there over an hour, but it was an American priest, as it turns out. And, we talked hour and a half, whatever it was. It felt like 5 minutes. I mean, when I came out, I didn't realize that much time had elapsed. It was just a very good conversation and discussion, and we obviously confession. But I came out of that with just this enlightenment. Oh, I know what it was. Confession was delayed, so we went to adoration for an hour. That's what it was. Confession was supposed to start at 1 and didn't start till 2, so we went to the adoration chapel for an hour. Then I went to confession, and just remember an amazing experience with him that lasted well over an hour, and just, aha. So I came back and said, okay, we're going to confession every week. So the 5 of us went to confession every week as a family.
And so you understood about the Eucharist and about confession, but was it hard for you to accept Our Lady?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of interesting. I guess it was right before I converted. We had some business in Mexico. I think I made 25 trips to Mexico City that year. A very contentious relationship with a major customer. And at some point, we tried to make it work, it wasn't going to work, so we were going to separate. And I took a team down to negotiate the separation of the business deal. We had attorneys, just very large. We were a large corporation; they were a large corporation as well. So it was what I expected to be a very contentious proceeding. And one of the gentlemen from the customer I'd known for years, and he and I bumped into each other in the hallway on the way into this discussion, and just reached agreement on the key issues. So the meeting took an hour, where we expected it was going to take days. So we changed all our flights, and we were flying that evening, so we had all day. And so I was in charge. It was my team that I had taken down there, and my manager was Catholic, and he had already taken us to Juan Diego's house, and I'd stayed at his home several times. And we actually had a shrine to Our Lady in our facility there, and we had brought the priest in to bless the shrine, and very devout workforce. So we had all this time, and I said, hey, let's go over to see the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe. So I dragged this whole team over there, and that was a pretty special experience.
Was there any particular moment when you just said, this is it, I have to become Catholic?
Well, at some point during the RCI program or class, I'm not sure I told Cynthia that was going to happen, but I don't know. I don't recall when during that 9-month or 8 or 9 month process when I came to realization. But
what was your family's reaction, Michael?
I don't know. I think they were excited because it was a unification of the family. It's one thing to go to the Presbyterian Church and still demonstrate a faith and a belief in the Bible, but to be able to have the family together, I think.
Do you think it is important for married couples to share the same faith?
I think makes it a little bit easier, probably creates a stronger family situation. Because children sense that lack of unification, so to be able to come together. But it's one thing to have no faith, right? And so at least, they were seeing, hey, he's going to church and he believes, and we could talk about issues. But to be able to, again, to share a common belief, I think is very important.
What did your siblings say? And your parents?
Well, they weren't particularly accepting, but it's not their life per se.
And have any of them converted since then?
No.
None of them have grown closer to the Catholic faith?
Again, my father's, he's gotten older, and he and his golfing buddies are able to golf less from a physical perspective. They've developed quite a bond of friendship, and during the winter, I know they have a weekly Bible study, and he's gotten, I kind of regained whatever faith he had as a child. I know my grandparents were very religious. Don't know what denomination. It wasn't Baptist, but it was some Christian denomination. And church was all day on Sunday, because we used to spend summers with my grandparents when we weren't playing sports. We'd spend 6 or 8 weeks on the farm. And Sunday, it was all day. My grandmother played the organ, and so we went to every service, and then we went to whatever the class was. They had like a Bible study. And then there was like a big picnic out in the church courtyard. We'd go home and rest for a couple hours, and then we'd go back for evening services. And then they had church services on Wednesday as well. So my grandparents were very strong beliefs. Somewhere my dad slipped away. Well, he's back now. And my sister seems to have picked up a little faith along the way. I'm not sure what church he's going to, but...
Before you said that it doesn't matter what Protestant church you go to. Why is that? And what's so different about the Catholic Church that caught your attention? What's so special about it?
I think if you look at the various religions, the Protestant ones are really all the same. They don't have the Eucharist, so Protestant or Methodist, Presbyterian, Lutheran really doesn't matter. And the foundation or the core of the Catholic Church is the Eucharist. And everything else, right, you could say is very similar. All the activities and everything that goes around that, but the Eucharist is core to the Catholic faith. I think that's the key difference. The other denominations, Christian denominations, don't have the Eucharist, so there's really not much to distinguish one from another, at least from my perspective.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that the Eucharist is in the Bible. Why had you not accepted that as a Protestant?
Well, I'd never been exposed to it before, so I never really thought about the Eucharist. Again, you think about just a brief exposure to the Methodist faith during high school. You fast forward 15 years probably, have a family, start going to the Presbyterian Church, okay. Just had never really been exposed to it. Really wasn't a Christian Bible thumper, so it wasn't like I'd come across John 6 and dismissed it. I just had never understood it, never seen it. So you start going through the RCI process. Father Danaher had a very strong love of the Eucharist. It was very clear, right? He's clearly pounding the table, and this is it, and drills John 6 into your head a few times. It's like, wow, that's very clear.
You also mentioned that you were Methodist, but you went to the university and you were just set on making money. And your faith, as I understand, wasn't as important. Would you say that this has changed since you became Catholic? That the faith...
They're really much more focused on the faith and family and less so on kind of the economic side of life. I mean, clearly the role I have to provide for the family. I've had to educate the girls and helps, in my own way, in whatever way I can. So you still have that responsibility to the family to provide, but it's really become less central to my life than probably before. But you got to think about the gifts that God's given you, and I've got certain skills, and during that period of time where you're working very focused and delivering a lot of value for the company that I work for, because that's what I'm called to do. So you have to contribute, whatever your vocation is, you have to do it to the fullest extent of your ability and put your whole effort into it. It doesn't mean it's less important. Clearly the your faith and your family are first, but that time where you're working, you've got to be focused and driven to be able to then provide for your family.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you do? If you're able to live out your faith at your job? If the people at your workplace know that you're Catholic? Does your faith, for example, change the way that you work?
Well, I've been in the logistics or supply chain industry my entire career. Business as a whole struggles, I think, from the perspective of ethics. There's clearly a focus on making money and competition, particularly in the United States, is first and foremost. We got to be number one. We got to be the biggest. We got to be the best. We've got to. There's a pressure to take advantage of others, both individuals and other corporations, customers. Fortunately, I've always been in a situation, or when I haven't, I've left that situation. There's actually 2 jobs I've walked away from because they didn't behave, I think, with the appropriate level of integrity and ethics. Just said, I'm just not going to live this way. And in fact, in 2004, I took a year off to work for the Home of the Mother, and one of the big reasons was, Father Raphael was very demonstrative during a homily about that. He gave the example of a group in Brazil that he had seen or experienced or met with, and they got lay people to do that. So that kind of planted the seed. And then I reflected upon the situation I was in, and clearly it was a corporation that was not treating people right. Just said, this is not a situation I need to be in. So I quit. It took me months to quit because they didn't want me to leave because of the contribution I was making. But that's the way it goes. So I took a year off and did some things working for Father Raphael and Father Felix. But business is a challenge. There's countries like Russia that we won't do business in because bribes are expected, for example. And fortunately, my corporation doesn't do business that way. So at the top, we set the example. And then, we treat people properly, treat them with respect, treat them with integrity. You have to make tough decisions. Sometimes you have to let people go, but you do it with fairness. You do it at times that, hopefully, it's never good to make those decisions, but it's what you have to do representing your corporation. So you just do it with respect and fairness and try to conduct all your business dealings that way. And if you're in situations that don't work, you need to go do something else. It takes a little bit of courage to do that, and that's one of the things, hopefully someday when I retire, I'm going to teach. And ethics, I haven't really figured out exactly what I'm going to teach, but I think business ethics needs to be a part of that. Because oftentimes in this society and culture we live in, it is lacking. And again, that's just how I am, and that's the way I conduct my life. And if the corporation doesn't want me doing that, then I'll go do something else.
And when it came down to the education of your 3 daughters, how did you balance work and family? And the faith?
Well, you think about how I was raised, and I was the oldest of 4 children. It was always expected they would go to college. Not that my parents supported me financially, but you're going to go to college. I had no idea what I was going to do until I got to college and started studying supply chain management. But I knew I was going to go to college. I had to make money to do that. And my parents instilled, my dad had an amazing work ethic, and that was always instilled and kind of drilled in us. And in the States they call it a Midwestern work ethic, and that's just the way it was. And we worked and we earned money, and so I always worked hard. And I had a purpose. I knew what I was looking to accomplish. So you kind of fast forward, you raise a family. My role is to provide for the family, so you have to continue to work hard and do all those things. There was probably times I didn't have the proper balance and perspective, but along the way you learn and hopefully spend the right amount of time. And we provided opportunities for the girls. I coached sports, tried to do some activities with them, and hopefully those were meaningful memories for them. I had fun. But there was times I had to leave meetings early because I had to get to a soccer practice, or we had a game. They played soccer out at, travel soccer. We had to go out of town. And you just balance your work schedule and just try to do the best you could. It wasn't perfect. In fact, at one point we lived in an area the commute was very difficult. So we sold that house and moved so that I could be home more, because I was getting home 7:30. I said, this isn't going to work. It was only because of the commute. So we changed our lifestyle, moved to allow the commute to be more reasonable and then be able to provide and spend more time with the family.
Did the Catholic faith help you in your family life to become a better father?
Yeah, probably. I mean, could the Presbyterian faith have done the same thing? Maybe. You know, I think it's tough to say. Clearly, a faith-based life will help you in your vocation as a husband and a father. In fact, this year it's 20 years that I've been a Catholic. Just thought of that the other day on our trip to the Holy Land. It's been 20 years. And as you continue to grow and develop and learn, you become a better father and husband. But I can't say, okay, this part of the Catholic faith has made me a better father. I don't know.
Okay, Michael, thank you so very much for sharing your testimony here in Changing Tracks.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Friends, family, it's been so wonderful to have Michael here with us today. This is an example of a Catholic family with all their difficulties, their jobs, and trying to balance work and family life. But if God is behind it all, it's a lot easier. Don't forget that. Thank you. Thank you for being here.